One ruled from behind a wall. The other ruled with a sword in his hand. One built a kingdom no outsider could enter. The other built an empire he could not stop expanding. Both were dictators. Both were paranoid. Both turned their countries into prisons where the walls were watching. But only one of them died on his own terms. Tonight, Kim Jong-il and Saddam Hussein, two of the most feared rulers of the late 20th century, two completely different visions of absolute power. One question: who built the more dangerous machine? Welcome back to Evil versus Evil, Monsters of History. This is episode 3. Born in Vyatskoye, in the Soviet Union, in 1941, Kim Jong-il was the son of a Korean guerrilla commander training under Stalin's army. His official biography, the one taught in North Korean schools, tells a very different story. It claims he was born on the slopes of Mount Paektu, the sacred mountain of Korean myth, beneath a double rainbow, while a brand new star appeared in the sky. None of that is true. But the lie itself reveals everything you need to understand about the man. Kim Jong-il grew up inside the shadow of his father. Kim Il-sung, the founder of North Korea and the architect of one of the most total dictatorships in human history. From childhood, Jong-il was groomed for succession. He studied at Kim Il-sung University. He worked his way through the Workers' Party apparatus. By the 1970s, he was already running the country's cultural and propaganda machinery. By the 1980s, he was effectively co-ruler. Then, he became something stranger. Kim Jong-il developed an obsession with cinema. He owned over 20,000 films. He wrote a book on filmmaking theory. He saw movies not as entertainment, but as the most powerful weapon of mass persuasion ever invented. And in 1978, he ordered the kidnapping of a famous South Korean film director, Shin Sang-ok, and his ex-wife, the actress Choi Eun-hee, and held them captive in North Korea for 8 years, forcing them to produce propaganda movies for his personal collection. This was the man who, in 1994, inherited the most isolated country on earth. His rule began with a catastrophe. From 1994 to 1998, North Korea collapsed into a famine known as the Arduous March. Crops failed. The Soviet Union, which had subsidized the country for decades, was gone. Floods devastated what little infrastructure remained. Somewhere between 600,000 and 3.5 million North Koreans starved to death. Kim Jong-il responded by spending the country's remaining resources on nuclear weapons. He built the bomb. He tested it in 2006. He turned a starving, broken nation into a nuclear power, and in doing so, made himself untouchable. The United States could not invade. China could not control him. South Korea could not absorb him. Every plate of food his people did not eat was converted into another centrifuge, another missile, another bargaining chip. Inside North Korea, his control was absolute. The political prison camps, known as Kwanliso, held an estimated 200,000 people at any given time. Entire families were imprisoned for the crimes of a single member, sometimes for 3 generations. To speak ill of Kim Jong-il was not just a crime. It was a curse passed down to your grandchildren. He died on the 17th of December 2011, reportedly of a heart attack on his private train. State media announced that the mountains themselves cracked in mourning. His son, Kim Jong-un, took the throne the next day. That was Kim Jong-il, the hermit god of the most closed kingdom on earth. Born in Al-Auja, Iraq, in 1937, Saddam Hussein came into the world in a mud hut in a village along the Tigris River. His father vanished before he was born. His mother gave him away to an uncle. He grew up in poverty, in violence, in a culture where, by his own later accounts, he learned to fight before he learned to read. He carried an iron bar to school to defend himself. He killed his first man, Allegedly, at the age of 19, Saddam joined the Ba'ath Party in 1957. He was involved in a failed assassination attempt on the Iraqi Prime Minister in 1959. He took a bullet to the leg and fled the country on horseback. He returned. He climbed. By the late 1960s, he was the second most powerful man in Iraq. And on the 16th of July, 1979, he made his move. He convened a meeting of the entire Ba'ath Party leadership. He had it videotaped. He stood at the podium, lit a cigar, and calmly read out the names of 68 party members he claimed had betrayed him. Armed guards entered the chamber and dragged each named man from the room. Within days, 22 of them were executed by firing squads composed of the surviving members, forced to kill their own colleagues to prove their loyalty. Saddam Hussein was now the absolute ruler of Iraq. He would remain so for the next 24 years. His method was the opposite of Kim Jong-il's. Where Kim hid, Saddam attacked. In 1980, just 1 year into his rule, he invaded Iran. The war lasted 8 years. Estimates of the dead range from 500,000 to over 1 million. He used chemical weapons. He used child soldiers. He used human waves of conscripts to clear minefields with their own bodies. In 1988, Saddam launched a campaign of extermination against his own Kurdish population in the north of Iraq. It was called the Anfal campaign. On a single morning, the 16th of March 1988, Iraqi planes dropped poison gas on the Kurdish town of Halabja. Within hours, more than 5,000 civilians were dead, most of them women and children, frozen in the streets where they fell. 2 years later, he invaded Kuwait. That decision triggered the Gulf War, an international coalition led by the United States that drove him out within weeks. He survived the war. He survived a decade of sanctions. He survived coup attempts. And then, on the 20th of March 2003, the United States invaded Iraq. Saddam disappeared. For 9 months, he hid in safe houses and farmhouses across central Iraq. On the 13th of December 2003, American soldiers pulled him from a hole in the ground on a farm near Tikrit. He was tried by an Iraqi tribunal. On the 30th of December 2006, he was hanged in a basement in Baghdad while his executioners shouted insults at him. That was Saddam Hussein, the hawk who could not stop hunting. Now let us put these two regimes side by side. Category 1. Military strength. Saddam built one of the largest standing armies in the world. At its peak, the Iraqi military included over 1 million soldiers, thousands of tanks, a sophisticated air force, and an arsenal of chemical weapons that he was willing to use without hesitation. Kim Jong-il built something smaller, but in some ways more dangerous. The Korean People's Army had over 1 million active troops and a reserve force of nearly 6 million more. And he had what Saddam never managed to obtain: nuclear weapons. The edge here goes to Kim, because a nuclear arsenal changes every other calculation on the table. Category 2. Propaganda mastery. Saddam built statues of himself in every Iraqi city. He commissioned a handwritten Quran inked in his own blood. His face was on the currency, the buildings, the school books, and the side of every government truck. Kim Jong-il built a religion. Inside North Korea, he was not just a leader. He was a deity. The textbooks taught that he could control the weather. The newspapers reported that he shot 11 holes in one the first time he ever played golf. Citizens were required to keep his portrait in their homes, dust it daily, and rescue it before their own children in case of fire. Saddam was the dictator. Kim was the god. The edge is Kim. Category 3. Economic control. Saddam had oil. Iraq sits on some of the largest petroleum reserves on the planet, and for 2 decades, every drop of that wealth flowed through Saddam's hands. He used it to build palaces, weapons, and patronage networks the size of small nations. Kim had almost nothing. North Korea has minimal natural resources, decaying infrastructure, and a population that often went hungry. Kim's economic control was a control of scarcity, not abundance. He decided who ate and who did not. He decided which villages received electricity and which were left in the dark. Saddam controlled wealth. Kim controlled survival. The edge is Saddam. Category 4. International alliances. Saddam had a complicated history. The United States armed him in the 1980s. France sold him weapons. The Soviet Union backed him. He played every major power against the others for years, but he also burned every bridge. By 2003, he had no friends left. Kim Jong-il had exactly one ally, but it was the right one, China. As long as Beijing protected him, no foreign power could touch him. The edge is Kim. Category 5. Legacy of destruction. Saddam's wars killed somewhere between 1 and 2 million people, mostly Iranians, Iraqis, and Kuwaitis. His chemical attacks poisoned entire regions. Kim's famine killed up to 3.5 million of his own people. His prison camps continue to operate today, more than a decade after his death. His nuclear weapons program permanently destabilized the entire Korean peninsula and remains the single most dangerous unresolved military situation in East Asia. Both legacies are catastrophic. But Saddam is closed. Kim is still ongoing, still growing, still threatening. The edge, narrowly, is Kim. So the categories split 4-1 in favor of Kim, but categories do not capture everything. Here is the wild card. What if their geographies were swapped? Imagine Saddam Hussein ruling North Korea, a landlocked, mountainous, isolated state with one powerful neighbor. He would not have lasted. Put him behind a wall, with no enemies to fight and no resources to sell, and his regime collapses inward. He would have invaded South Korea within 5 years and triggered a war he could not win. Now imagine Kim Jong-il ruling Iraq, a country awash in oil money, surrounded by historic enemies, sitting on the most contested ground on earth. He would not have invaded Iran. He would not have invaded Kuwait. He would have built nuclear weapons quietly, 10 years faster than he did in North Korea, financed by oil revenue, and the entire Middle East would now be living under the threat of a nuclear Pyongyang in the desert. The terrifying conclusion is that Saddam was a hawk who would have been more dangerous as a hermit, and Kim was a hermit who would have been catastrophic as a hawk. Neither of them was operating at the ceiling of their cruelty. Each one was simply matched to the wrong country. The verdict, by the categories, Kim Jong-il wins. He built a longer-lasting machine. He acquired the ultimate weapon. He created a regime so total that his son inherited it without resistance and still rules today. Saddam built an empire that crumbled the moment foreign tanks crossed the border. Kim built one that has now survived 3 generations of Kims and shows no sign of falling. But here is the part that should disturb you. Saddam Hussein died as he had lived, defiant, violent, refusing the hood at his own execution. The world watched him hang. Kim Jong-il died in his sleep on a private train, surrounded by aides who would have followed him into the grave if he had asked. There was no trial. There was no reckoning. There was only a state funeral so vast and so theatrical that mourners who failed to cry hard enough were reportedly sent to the camps. Saddam was the hawk. He flew into the sun and burned. Kim was the hermit. He never left the cave, and the cave is still there. Next episode. In episode 3, we will see Vlad the Impaler versus Ivan the Terrible, 2 of the most feared rulers in European history. One impaled 20,000 of his enemies in a single afternoon. The other beat his own son to death in a fit of rage. Only one of them earned a name that still haunts the language: